trade as we have it right now between China and Europe is simply unsustainable. Over the last 5 years, the Chinese export increased by something like 50%, and our exports to China decreased by 30%. On top of it, we see that a lot of European companies is kind of squeezed out from the third market. So really, that's what you would call in basketball the full court pressing, and therefore. I believe that we also need very firm, regular, structural engagement with Chinese counterparts, how to deal with that.
30% of all global industrial production is in China. The UN's estimate is that goes to 45% by the end of this decade. So almost half of everything made in a factory in the whole world we made in China, and yet they only consume 13% of global production. So that is an extraordinary amount of stuff that has to go somewhere. America's closing itself off. You're the last open, rich world market. I mean, your outgoing top trade official said, this is an imbalance that the world cannot digest. So dialogue is great, but don't you actually have to threaten really serious measures?
In my long experience, I really believe that people and partners react better to engagement than to threats, and that I'm sure that I will use this approach until I conclude my public service. I think that what's very clear, and I can tell you that we are not shy about how we are messaging this to our Chinese counterparts.
Are you ready to take some pain to show China that they have to play a different game if they want to keep access to European markets, to invest in Europe?
I think that I would really advised against any threats or any.
But they're the ones making the threats. They made the threats
so,
on 27th of April. So what do you do?
What you do is that we, of course, are very clear about the fact that we are going to fight tooth and nail for every factory, for every job in the European Union. And I was very, very clear about that. But I would not be sending, the threatening messages over the wires to my Chinese counterparts, because I want to talk to them.